My name is Cole Bekarian. I am the Director of Analytics at RREAF. I've been here almost exactly 4 years now. Basically, Director of Analytics is a fancy way of saying lead analyst on the asset management side. So I tend to run a small team of analysts, and we're going to be talking about Excel. I'm going to stay pretty basic with it because I think it's better at y'all's level to kind of understand the foundational stuff than it is to try to push the boundaries, especially with the amount of time we have. Yeah, I mean, just a word about Excel. Really, it doesn't really matter which area of commercial real estate you go into. Having a strong knowledge of Excel will always benefit you. It doesn't matter if you're not really an analyst, and like, let's say you are more relationship based in commercial real estate on the acquisition side. Yeah, I firmly believe that these things that we go over are formulas and ideas that you guys should have a pretty strong grasp of leaving this internship. And you're obviously not going to get the chance to organically work with every one of these with whatever you're doing, but that doesn't mean you still can't practice them when you're around people in this office that have been around them for a long time. I really encourage you guys just to ask as many questions as you can, because for the full-time roles you guys are going to be looking at, you want to be able to have an intelligent conversation about Excel. And that is, an intelligent conversation is much more than saying, I know how to do a VLOOKUP. Even if the recruiter, that's all they know about, you should be able to talk about what you've done in multiple internships. And, this is really a chance to impress people either on your resume or in a job interview. So we'll dive in here. VLOOKUP. The V stands for vertical. That means you are looking something up in a column and you want to look for something in this column and then return the value in whatever specified column. Okay, so let's say I want a formula that dynamically pulls diameter of any planet I put in this cell here. So the obvious thing to go to, because I only have one variable that I'm looking for, I'm not looking for a multivariate thing both on X and Y axis. I'm looking just on the vertical axis. It's vertical column, VLOOKUP is the way to go. So equals VLOOKUP, lookup value, table array. What should I put for column index number? As a number, that's 2, because planet is 1, second column is 2. That's the one I want to pull from. And then range lookup, I want exact match. Pretty much every time you do one of these formulas, you're looking for an exact match. I haven't found, there are some times but that you want approximate match, but your default should always be exact match. So enter, it's pulling 12,000 for Venus, and if I put Mars here, it's going to pull 6,000. Simple enough, right? Does anyone have any questions on that one? All right, we're moving along. HLOOKUP. So it's the exact same concept, but instead of me wanting to look for things here, looking in the row, and I'm wanting to return something in the correlating row. So it's just flipped horizontally. So these are our financial management workbooks. These workbooks have a lot, almost every single one of these formulas and ideas within them. This is an example of a HLOOKUP. I'm doing a budget variance here. So I'm wanting to divide my real number by my budget to find out my variance. So if I put a 9 here, that means 2,145,000 is 96% of 2,222,000. So I'm using an HLOOKUP here to dynamically look in this array for this number 9, right? And return the number in the specified row. And I've specified the row right here. So it's saying, look for 9 in this top row. Once you find 9, go down to the row I specify and pull this number. And then the rest of the formula is obviously just dividing it by this. And that's how we get a percentage. Okay, XLOOKUP. So XLOOKUP is, I'm going to start with index match because index match is an example of like nested formulas. Back here. So now index match and XLOOKUP is like combining a VLOOKUP and an HLOOKUP. You're taking two different planes and you're trying to, it's basically just like looking on a y-axis, specifying your x-axis and y-axis and arriving at a certain point. Both HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP are based off one variable. XLOOKUP and index match can be based on two variables, and it's more dynamic in that way. For example, so if I want to know specifically the diameter of Earth, this data set isn't great for this because I've simplified it a little too much, but so index your array here, row number 1, 2, 3, 4, column number 1, 2, $12,000, right? Now I want to make this even more dynamic because I have these this 4 here and this 2 here. That's not going to allow me to drag this formula out across the table. It's going to be completely stuck on this point. So what I can do is I can say, instead of this 4 here, I want to replace that with a match function that returns the number of the selection in this list. So if I match for here, and I'm going to do this here. Earth and diameter. So match, here, I'll break it out here too, equals match Earth or lookup value, lookup array, match type, lookup value, comma, lookup array, comma, match type, exact match. What do we think this formula is going to return when I hit enter? Given that match returns the number of a specified selection within an array. What is Earth's corresponding number? 4, correct. So if this, and I'll do one more. So I want to do the same thing for diameter. match the word diameter in this lookup array, exact match. What's this going to return? Correct. So now you'll notice that I have 4 here and I have 2 here, but they're static inputs. What I can do is because I know this formula returns a 4, I can copy this and put it in place of the 4. And nothing will change. What did I do? Oh, I copied the equal. And I can do the same thing here. Copy this. So now this allows us to populate this in a table anywhere, and no matter what these driving factors are, it will always be the same. So I can put satellites here, Earth satellites 1. I can put Mars here, Mars satellites 2. You get the gist. Okay, so that's index match. Similarly, XLOOKUP does the same thing, but even more dynamically. I use index match. XLOOKUP is a better function than index match. You should probably just be using XLOOKUP. I like teaching index match because it's an example of nesting functions where you take that match and you sub it in for that number. XLOOKUP does that work for you. So once again, if I want to know the diameter of Earth, or let's say Mars, this is my lookup value. Mars, this is my lookup array. This is my return array. I might get this wrong again. If not found, 0, match mode, exact match. Got it. So it's pulling so another thing it does is it assumes that you're going to want to do this across the selection, and it pulls satellites too. So now I've got like almost a mini table here, and anything I put, it's going to return both. Cool. Does anyone have any questions on that? Moving on. So some ifs, for whatever reason, seems to come up a lot in commercial real estate. It's probably just because of the way we underwrite and process financials, I guess is really what it is. But some ifs obviously combines a sum formula and an if statement. So if this is true, sum these numbers. So where this comes in really handy is something like processing financials. For payroll and benefits, this expense here, you notice I have a sum ifs here. Sum range, criteria range, criteria. My criteria is PR. So sum ifs, it looks in a criteria range. It looks to see if it finds the criteria that you put, and it returns the numbers, the corresponding numbers from the sum range, and it adds them up. So you'll notice that my sum range is financials input column K. My criteria range is financials input column C. So I go to financials input, and my sum range is column K. Again, this is January, so that's why it's column K. And so in my criteria range is column C. So it's looking all in this column for this criteria, PR. No, it's kind of small. So if it finds PR here, found it here, it's going to take these numbers and it's going to add them up. And these are kind of jacked up. So we're going to audible and switch to the most recent month. So the sum of these is 24,949. I'm going to assume that these are the only PRs in this whole column. I'm pretty confident in that. So 24,949. Let's see that. 24,949. So it's looking for that PR criteria in that column, and then it's returning all of those numbers, and then it's summing those numbers into one number. So obviously a really powerful tool for subgrouping categories. And subgrouping categories is a big thing when it comes to processing financials and income and expense. Okay. Does anyone know what concatenate does? And specifically, it's combining the text values of two different cells. Yeah, this is really simple. Like, let's say I've got a name here, and I want to put the name together. This happens a lot with names because names tend to, for whatever reason, never seem to be in the data format that you want them to be in. But so I've got first and last name. I want to cell with just the full name. So I do concat text1, comma. Actually, what I really want to do is I want to do last name, comma, first name. So I do last name, comma, first name. But what's the problem with that? If I want the cell to show last name, comma, first name. All nice. Well done. That's right. So to fix this, I add a third argument in here in quotes. Whenever you put something in quotes, it's going to process it as text generally. And I'm going to do comma, space, close quote, another comma to begin the third argument. There you go. That's concatenate. This is really helpful with a lot of things. It pops up every now and then. And it's very simple. It does what it purports to do. Okay. Does anyone know what offset is? So offset is a really powerful tool that you should become very familiar with. What offset does is it's basically like if you were to just slap an X and Y axis in the middle of your sheet. You tell offset what your origin 0 point is, and then it will find whatever cell you specify, either up 5 over 3, down 3 over 4. It will just find that exact point every time. And what it will also do is you can give it heights and widths. So you can be like, okay, this is my starting point. I want you to go up 3, left 4, and I want you to grab those 3 cells where that point begins, either 3 wide or 3 high. So a practical example of this is here. When we have trailing financials, all we're doing is we're either grabbing the last 12 months, we're either grabbing the last 9 months, grabbing the last 3 months, 4 months. You can see these are dynamic inputs. I can put 2 here, 1, whatever. So I've got an offset function here. So my offset function, it's basically saying T5 is my starting point, my reference point. And then I want it to go 0 rows. So we're still at the same place we started with. We're still in T5. Then columns, I want it to go -1. Now we're in S5, right? Height, I want it 1. So we're still in S5, right? A height of 1 is just 1 cell. So we're still here. And then the width, I want to be dynamic with this cell. So I want it 3 wide. So what this is doing is it is pulling this range. That's your trailing 3 for gross market rent, right? And it is also summing them. So it's summing these 3 and then annualizing it, obviously multiplying it by 12 over 3. So multiplying it by 4, annualizing it. So it's taking these 3 months, multiplying it by 4. Does everyone understand the concept of annualizing? Yes, it's taking a portion of your year and then it's multiplying that by whatever fraction you need to get 12 months of data. That way, because if I were just putting this here and I was getting 78,000 for the last 3 months, and then I wanted to look at T5 or however, yeah. Oh, 578,000. And then I want to look at T6 and I'm doing 1 million. I don't know what that means. I'm comparing 578 for 3 months to, 1,128. I don't know if we're doing better or not, but when I annualize it, we can see a trend. So down here with everything annualized, I can see, oh, look, our NOI is trending up, which is good. If these were just portions of 12 months, I would have no idea what we were trending on. So I want to sort these alphabetically by last name. That's a problem because even if I put a filter here and filter it alphabetically, it's going to do it by the first name. So how do we break this out in 2? You could technically do a left or right function if all of the names were the same number of characters, but they're not. So if I try to do, let's say I want the last name equals right here, number of characters 5. Works for this, isn't dynamic. So quick way to do it is text to columns. I select this data, text to columns. So you can either do fixed width, which if you can do, it's literally, you can just slap a line down the middle, but again, with different characters in each name, that's not what we want. So we want delimited, and then we can specify the character that we want to break it with. And so it will look for semicolons, commas, spaces, or other. You can just define it. space, super easy, next, finished. It pops this out. Now I do first, last, filter, sort A to Z. There you go. Goal seek. Goal seek is a very, goal seek is a very financially oriented formula. It is basically a recursive formula that is going to run until it solves for a certain output. So, for example, if I've got an investment, and this happens a lot in like our equity waterfalls, where we want to solve for a return. So we're asking Excel to find a number that gives us this return, solving for this return. So if I have an equity investment of $200,000, right? And then I have cash flows. Let's just make this 1/1/2020. Whoops. Does everyone know what EO month is? End of month, very good. Start date, however many months you want. I want the end of each month. And I'm gonna drag this out like this. Okay. So, and I've got random cash flows here, positive cash flows, 20K, 30K, 60. Is that 60 or 600? I don't know. We know our cash flows. We're looking at our investment. We say we put $200,000 of equity in. Let's say we're going out to brokers and we're getting some numbers in, but we need to know internally what our acceptable IRR is. So let's say, I'm going to do equals XIRR to find my return values, dates. Okay, wow, I nailed that. I was going for 20. So this is, our preliminary numbers. Now we talk with leadership and they say, we need to know what sales proceeds we need to hit a 25 IRR because we're not selling below a 25 IRR. Okay. So either I can sit here and I go, well, this is 120 and it's at 19 right now. So I can guess maybe 130. Pretty damn good, but I'm just too good at this. So this, let's say, all right, so we're playing around with it. I want Excel to do this for me and do it exact, right? I want 25.00. So I go here, I go to data, I go to goal seek, and I say set this cell to value 25.00% by changing this cell. So what Excel is going to do is it's going to run iterative calculations until it finds the perfect number to get 25.00. And I already know that this Excel is set to a limited amount of iterations and a limited amount of decimal points. So it's probably not going to give me 25.0000 perfectly. You have to set that up in options because it limits the amount of memory you use. If you make it, if you say, I don't care, run 100,000 calculations and at 10 decimal points, that's going to use a lot of memory to get that perfect number. That's a lot of calculations. So the base version of Excel without tweaking it, it doesn't get to like the thousandth place very exact typically. All right. So there you go. Let's see how well it did. Okay, not bad. It's about as good as you can ask for. So yeah, it gave me this number down to past since. Does that make sense? These are our operating cash flows. These are the distributions we're making to investors. In this cell, and this is obviously very, very simplified, but this is our reversion cash flow. So this is tied to our sale amount. That's which is the only thing that we have a say in at this point. Everything else is kind of in the past. Okay, and then you can take this one step further and you can run a what-if analysis and build it into a sensitivity table. I want to know my IRR and equity multiple for Class A for all of these prices. And I combined the what-if analysis and the data table. So I say, this is my input for this waterfall model. Everything flows down from this price, right? And this is my final output, these returns here. This is what I care about. So, so I say, this is my final output, common IRR, and this is what I'm interested in. These are the two variables I want explained by this range of prices, right? I want Excel to go through this model, and I want it to plug 40 million in my input and tell me what these would be, a what if. I want it to plug 41 million in my input and tell me what these would be. Same thing for 43. I don't want to do it manually. I want it to do it for me. So I select this, and I have my independent variable on top, my dependent variable here, and I go to data, what if, data table. And it's saying, right now it's asking me, okay, I get that this is a data table, but what is your input to the model that you want this running off of? So I'm going to put F2, because this is my ultimate input that drives everything and affects these numbers. I'm going to put it here, and it's going to auto-populate what these numbers would be at those prices. Make sense? This is like a really basic but important thing to know how to be able to do if you're calculating any sort of returns, because almost every time you're calculating returns, leadership wants to know a range, right? They don't care about, like, especially when you're in the early talks, they want to know, what's my range that I'm looking at? I get that it can, I get that the final number is going to be variable, but I want a low and a high end to have a really good idea that the final number is going to be somewhere in here. Okay. And then we're close to wrapping up here. Sum product is, I'm not going to spend too much. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. Whenever you want to do a weighted average, use a sum product. And I can tell you right now, as analysts or whatever, you're always going to want to use a weighted average when you can. A a simple average for a lot of what we do is almost useless in when you're talking about, let me see if I can think of like, I want to know, if I want to know the rent per square foot of 8 different unit types, then I can't just take the simple average of the whole range of square feet and the whole range of rents. I have to use a weighted average to find so I'm using the weighted average to find the rent per square foot of the property because I need to know how many units there are of each floor plan. That's where a weighted average is important. If I'm just assuming that there's the same, a simple average will assume that there's the same amount of 3 bedrooms as there are studios or 1 bedrooms. That's never the case. 3 bedrooms are like 15, percent max usually. I mean, I'm not sure, but they're rarely equivalent to the amount of 1s and 2s. So that's going to, and your rent per square foot on your 3 bedroom is going to be much lower because it's the biggest floor plan, right? So if you take a simple average of that and assume that there's the same amount of units in each one, you're going to really skew your number down of what your rent per square foot is. And that's just a completely inaccurate reading. So it's something you should be using a weighted average for. And you should always be using some product. It's very easy. I'm sure you guys can figure it out. Really the last thing I'll touch on here is macros and Chat GPT. Every single one of you guys should have a Chat GPT login if you don't already, and every question you have about Excel, you should be asking Chat GPT first and then someone in this office, because it's like, for what you guys are doing, it's like an extremely powerful tutor, and it's right like 9 times out of 10 at least. Another thing that ChatGPT is really powerful for is writing macros. I mean, you can literally tell it exactly what you want to accomplish in English, and it will give you the macro. And where this has helped me is I don't really know the Excel VBA coding syntax very well. I know what I want to do, and I know how to do a macro. I just can't think of what the perfect syntax formula is within that VBA code. And so, I'll just go into ChatGPT, explain what I want, it will tell me, and I'll tweak a couple things, but I know that the chunks of information that it's giving me, at the very least, I can put together. And oftentimes, I really don't have to put anything together. Just if I prompt it right, it will tell me what I want. So, and then I guess just kind of to sum with Excel, sometimes I see like new analysts or interns, and I did this a lot, they run into a problem, and in the back of their mind, I can tell that they think it's a glitch with Excel. It's never a glitch with Excel. It's always your fault. Every single time. Even when you're like, have sat there for like 30 minutes and you're like, I cannot for the life of me explain why this isn't working. It's your user error. Unless like Excel is crashing or something. So the best way to approach a problem with Excel is to say, what do I know for sure? And you create a list and you knock things out. And you say, what do I know for sure? What do I know for sure? What do I know for sure? And eventually, if you do that enough times, you're training yourself to like approach problems from like a first principles standpoint, where you're saying, how can I quickly identify what I'm not positive about? And generally speaking, whatever you're not positive about is where the problem lies. Or when you list out, what do I know for sure? You'll put something, what do I know for sure? And then you'll look at it after you've put it down on paper and you're like, I don't know that for sure. I had just assumed in my mind that that was a given. But especially when you're working with formulas that are super long and like you get lost halfway through, there's no way your brain can like keep up with everything that you're doing. So you've got to just take it piecemeal. Yeah, the last thing, I've got a list of shortcuts that I printed out that can be helpful with you guys. Guys, learn your shortcuts now because you just won't have time for them later. I missed learning, like, I know a decent amount of shortcuts, but I wish I knew way more just because you look way cooler doing it. I mean, like, way cooler. If you ever watch Tony in Excel, it's like, it's a sight to behold. And you won't, like, now is the time to learn, and it will increase your productivity for sure. So I did the shortcuts. Generally, shortcuts follow a very simple they start with Control or Alt, and what Alt does, really, where you should like start practicing things with Alt, because when I click Alt, I can do virtually anything I want, right? With these prompts that show up here. Like, let's say this is like this, and I'm in here and I'm doing things, and I'm like, I don't want to touch my mouse to get these to show up. Control Shift right, Alt, and then I say, what do I want to do? I want to format home. I want to format these to show. So format, Alt H O I, auto fit column width. So it's just things like that, and like Alt H, I mean, the world is at your fingertips here. You really don't need your mouse for much of anything at all. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? If something comes up, just shoot me an email. Yeah, I'm happy to explain really anything in Excel. But again, ChatGPT is your friend, so use that.